Hello and welcome to Swiss Info's news programme for January the 6th, the first for 2012. And a Happy New Year to everyone from Bern. I'm Julia Slater. Well, there's just one event that's been dominating the headlines here this week, and which certainly isn't over as we go to the studio. We'll be coming back to it in a moment. We'll also be hearing about an unusual happening marking the centenary of one of Switzerland's iconic sites. The main story of the week has been the accusations and counter-accusations concerning the head of the Swiss National Bank, or SNB, Philipp Hildebrand. First of all, the Swiss media reported that the financial affairs of the Hildebrand family had been investigated by auditors and given the all-clear. Then details started emerging about an advantageous currency trade made by Hildebrand's wife, Kasia, a Swiss-American dual national, which gave her a large profit when she bought dollars for francs when the dollar was low and sold them again when the dollar rose. The implication was that she had inside knowledge about the bank's plans to weaken the franc. Then some Sunday newspapers really set the cat among the pigeons by revealing that the source of the information about the Hildebrands' accounts was none other than Christoph Blocher, former Justice Minister and Deputy Chairman of the right-wing People's Party, who had presented it to two government ministers. And then it turned out that he had got the information from an employee of the Sarrazin Bank who had given him stolen documents. Still reeling from that, we got the next bombshell. The Weltwoche weekly magazine, which is close to the People's Party, announced that it had proof that Philipp Hildebrand himself, not just his wife, had indulged in insider dealing. Insider dealing, violations of bank secrecy, and what looks like political intrigue mixed with intense personal animosity. What's next? Hildebrand spoke to the media on January the 5th and gave as good as he got.
Meine Damen und Herren, ich bin mir bewusst.
I am aware that the SNB's monetary policy and its efforts in the area of financial stability have given rise to intense discussion and controversy over the past few years. However, I regret that in certain quarters, where for many years Swiss banking secrecy has been vehemently defended, a serious breach of this very same secrecy should now be acceptable in the pursuit of political goals. This is damaging the interests of Switzerland.
Sie schaden damit den Interessen der Schweiz.
He explained in some detail the transactions he and his wife had carried out in 2011, which had been examined by the auditors and given a clean bill of health. But he admitted that there was not enough transparency in the financial dealings of members of the bank's governing board and proposed some stricter measures for the future. I asked Swiss Info's business correspondent Matt Allen why Mr. Blocher and the People's Party seemed to have such a problem with Mr. Hildebrand.
Well, officially, this all started in 2009-2010 when the Swiss National Bank decided to buy up large amounts of euros to stop the franc from appreciating too much against that currency. Now, it seemed to fail because the franc appreciated nonetheless, and the Swiss National Bank was left with losses of 26 billion francs. Jury's out a little bit on whether that makes it a complete flop, this policy, because some people say without this intervention, the franc would have appreciated even faster and the export industry would have suffered all the more. But the figures don't look particularly good on paper.
So there seem to be economic reasons or banking reasons for this problem, but one's got the feeling that there's something more personal about it as well.
Well, of course, the Swiss People's Party, a very conservative, staunchly traditional party. And when you look at Hildebrand's CV, he made his name in New York hedge funds. And then at a very young age, he became the head of the National Bank. Hildebrand's also said to have made powerful enemies in the Swiss financial sector by supporting these tough new regulations that keep the commercial banks in check. And he's also recently been appointed to the International Financial Watchdog, the Financial Stability Board. Now, none of these fit in with the traditional area of the chairman of the SNB, who's traditionally been older, more establishment-minded, and could be relied on as a sort of a rock at the helm of the nation's economy. Hildebrand, with his background in aggressive alternative finance and his rather more suave and cosmopolitan outlook, doesn't really fit in with these shoes. And the People's Party appear convinced that his early decision to intervene in the currency markets marks out Hildebrand as being rather impulsive and unreliable, and rather perhaps more suited to New York than Zurich.
In actual fact, Hildebrand's been praised for keeping a cool head when all around are losing theirs.
Well, there's the other side of the story. I mean, what I'm giving you is the People's Party side of the story. Other people say, in fact, Hildebrand has been very clever and quite reserved in his actions, that the intervention of 2009, 2010 actually did work. You just didn't see it because you couldn't see how far the Swiss franc would have appreciated had this intervention not taken place. Of course, the action in September of putting a ceiling of 1 franc 20 against the euro was also seen as being a very clever move that didn't go too far and wasn't too impulsive. So you've got two sides of the story. It's not everyone against Hildebrand. It is very much the People's Party against Hildebrand.
And presumably the attacks against him are playing into the hands of speculators.
Well, they could do. This is an area that could be of some worry because the credibility of a country's central bank is crucial to the country's economy and to the country's currency. And if there are chinks in the armour, if there seem to be bad decisions being made, and if indeed the chairman has been attacked in such a personal way, it could well lead to volatility in the markets and to speculators coming in. We'll have to see how this whole affair unfolds as to how much damage could be caused, but it must be causing some worries within the Swiss government.
As I said earlier, the Hildebrand's currency transactions came to light when a bank employee passed confidential documents to a lawyer who, it's now been revealed, is a People's Party politician. The employee handed himself over to the police and the bank dismissed him on the spot and is considering legal action against him. But couldn't this employee be regarded as a whistleblower? Can it be right that he faces prosecution? I turn to Jean-Pierre Méan, president of the Swiss chapter of Transparency International, who explained that motive is all.
In order for a whistleblower to be worthy of some protection, then he must fulfill two conditions. He must think in good faith that he has found something which is illegal or highly unethical, and he must contact the authority or the person which is appropriate to deal with this.
And in general, what kind of protection does a whistleblower have if they really do it in good faith?
Well, in Switzerland, actually, they have no protection. They may get some sympathy from a judge, but they are not really protected.
And is this different in other countries?
It's different in other countries. In some countries, they are protected against dismissal. They may get some financial compensation. In the United States, a whistleblower can even get a share of the amount which has been saved due to his intervention, which is a bit difficult to accept in Europe, I think. But financial compensation, if the whistleblower is fired, is certainly appropriate. I think some support, some advice is also needed.
And do whistleblowers sometimes end up in prison?
Sometimes they do end up in prison. You see, in that particular case, for example, apart from the political aspect of the case, assuming that this whistleblower had contacted the correct administration and had no political motivation, he would still have broken banking secrecy.
But that's an impossible dilemma. If you are working for any company and you think there's some kind of financial misbehavior going on, you're not going to be able to prove it or make any kind of case, usually, unless you can get hold of documents that the firm doesn't want to release.
Well, it is not exactly true. You can also make a verbal report. If you can go, for example, to an investigative magistrate and say, this is what I have observed, and then the investigative magistrates can go and seize the documents. That would be absolutely no problem, I think.
Mrs. Hildebrand justified her purchase of dollars for francs by saying they were ridiculously cheap. Well, although she doesn't work in finance anymore, she had many years of experience in that field. Was it really obvious to outsiders that it was such a good deal? Emil, an IT programmer who lives in Zurich, had never done any trading, but kept reading in the papers about how strong the Swiss franc was against the euro.
At the time, it was basically almost 1-to-1, and I thought, well, it's not going to get much better than this. And then I kept thinking about it like throughout the whole day, and then I thought, well, you know what? If I keep thinking about it, it's going to be one of those, I wish I had done it. And then I decided I'll just call up my bank representative and see, how hard it is to actually buy a couple of €1,000. And that's what I did, and it was surprisingly easy. And then before I knew it, I had an account with €20,000 in it.
Did you feel that you'd taken a risk of any kind?
Not really at the time, because I thought, you know what, it can't really go down much further. So, worst case, I thought at least I'll make my money back, maybe minus the exchange fee if there is such a thing. And right after I purchased them, sometimes you get that feeling like, oh dear, what did I just do? But in this case, it was more like, I actually thought maybe I should have bought more because it just seemed like such a good deal at the time.
And have you sold them yet?
I haven't. And I kind of been kicking myself because at one point, I think they were up to almost 1.25. So I would have made like almost 25% of my money. And I was talking to my dad, and my dad is kind of big on the, investing in the market and things. And he said, well, as long as you make 5% on any investment, that's a good time to sell. And I was sitting there looking at 25%. And obviously, you kind of get greedy. And I thought, well, maybe I'll just wait for it to go up a little bit more. And since then, of course, it's gone down. I think I'll wait until it touches 125 and then I'll sell them.
Do you think you can get addicted to buying and selling foreign exchange?
Well, yeah, kind of. It's like you only need one sample to kind of get really interested in it. And just as I had bought them, I went home and I looked on the internet to see what kind of things I can see, where how the market is moving for every second. You start actually thinking about currency trading because it has certain trends to it, and you keep thinking, well, I could make money on this. But of course, that's kind of like a dangerous thing to think because you don't really know that much about how it actually works, and I'm sure there's fees involved and all that kind of stuff that you have to take into account as well. But I have to say, it kind of makes you a little bit more interested in it just because you've done it once.
You're listening to Swiss Info.